Welcome to Revenge Stories. I smelled the fire before I saw it. A sharp, acrid scent, burning satin, melting lace filled the bridal suite of Cleveland's Grand Pavilion, mixing with the soft perfume of roses and champagne. My wedding dress. My wedding dress was on fire. I turned, my heart slamming into my ribs, just in time to see flames licking at the delicate ivory fabric, blackening the intricate beading I had spent 6 months perfecting. The train, once flowing like liquid pearl, was now curling into ash, and standing there, in front of the inferno, lighter still clutched in her perfectly manicured hand, was Margaret Wilson, my mother-in-law to be. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't even panicking. No, she was smiling. "There," she said, her voice smug, triumphant. "Now you can't marry my son." My bridesmaids gasped behind me, frozen in their lavender gowns, faces reflecting my horror. Jessica, my maid of honor, took a step forward as if to intervene, but I held up a hand. I needed to hear this. I needed to hear every single word of justification from the woman who had just committed arson on my wedding day. Margaret tilted her head, watching me with the air of someone who had just finished a long overdue chore. "Jason needs someone from our circle, Valerie, someone who understands his world. Not some nobody from the wrong side of town." Her words stung, but they didn't surprise me. Margaret had never tried to hide her disdain for me. The moment Jason had put a ring on my finger, she had made it her mission to make me feel like an outsider. The veiled insults, the accidental exclusion from wedding planning decisions, the not-so-subtle attempts to introduce Jason to Melissa Hammond, the daughter of a real estate mogul who, according to Margaret, was far more suitable wife material. But this was war. I took a step toward her, my hands clenched so tightly that my nails bit into my palms. "You have no idea what you just did." She laughed, tossing her designer purse over her shoulder, eyes glittering with satisfaction. "Oh, I know exactly what I did. I saved my son from the biggest mistake of his life." I stared at the charred remains of my dream dress, felt the sting of smoke in my eyes, and something inside me snapped. Without breaking eye contact, I reached for my phone and pressed a single button. Margaret's smirk faltered. "What are you doing?" I turned the screen toward her. On it was a live feed, a direct stream from the camera set up at the wedding venue, the one meant to capture guest arrivals for Jason's grandparents in Florida and my sister overseas. A massive projection screen at the ceremony space was now displaying this very room. Margaret Wilson, standing in her elegant navy dress, burning her future daughter-in-law's wedding gown while announcing to the world that she thought I was beneath her. The color drained from her face. What is that?" "The wedding live stream," I said calmly. "It's been running for the last 20 minutes, capturing everything, including you." Jessica, quick as ever, had already moved to open a window, clearing the smoke. Tina, another bridesmaid, gasped as her phone buzzed violently in her hand. "It's Jason," she whispered. "He's coming." I didn't need to ask how he knew. The murmur of voices on my phone speaker told me everything our guests had seen. The groomsmen, the flower girls, the family, the friends. Jason had seen. I turned my head just as the door burst open. Jason stood there, still in his tuxedo, his breath coming fast, his eyes locked onto mine before flickering to his mother. Then, finally, to the scorched pile of fabric at our feet. His voice, when he spoke, was deadly quiet. "Mom, tell me I didn't just watch you burn Valerie's wedding dress." Margaret took a step back, suddenly looking less like a composed socialite and more like a woman scrambling for control. "Sweetheart, you don't understand." Jason's hands clenched at his sides. I heard everything. His father appeared behind him, looking grave, taking in the room, his wife, the destroyed dress, the evidence. Margaret opened her mouth, but this time, I cut her off. "It's just a dress," I said, my voice steady. "But your mother just showed exactly what she thinks of me." Of us, in front of everyone. Jason turned fully to his mother, and in that moment, I saw it in his eyes, the realization, the reckoning. And Margaret? For the first time that night, she looked afraid. Jason's gaze burned into his mother. His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle in his temple twitching. The silence in the bridal suite was thick, suffocating. Margaret stepped back, her manicured fingers gripping the strap of her designer purse like it was a lifeline. Sweetheart, I was just. Stop lying. Jason's voice was sharp, slicing through her excuse like a blade. I saw everything. Everyone saw everything. Her eyes darted toward my phone, still displaying the live stream, and then to the bridesmaids, who stood frozen in silent, stunned solidarity. The murmur from the guests echoed through the speaker, growing louder, more incredulous with every passing second. Turn it off. Margaret suddenly lunged forward, reaching for my phone with shaking hands, her perfectly curled hair coming undone in her desperation. Jessica, my ever fearless maid of honor, stepped between us before she could get close. Mrs. Wilson, I'd think carefully about your next move. Everyone at the venue is watching you, including the press. That's already setting up outside. Margaret's breath hitched. The press? Her voice wavered for the first time. Oh, yes. The moment she set my dress on fire, she didn't just ignite the satin, I made sure she ignited her own social death. The Wilson name was Cleveland royalty, and now their matriarch was exposed as an unhinged, classist saboteur in front of the entire elite society she desperately sought to impress. Jason's father, Richard Wilson, finally spoke, his voice cold and sharp. Margaret, what have you done? Margaret whirled around, her lips parting, searching for an answer that would make this all go away. But there was nothing left to say. She had already damned herself. I lifted my phone, angling the camera directly at her. Miss S. Wilson, would you like to repeat what you just said about me? You know, for the guests who might have missed it? Margaret's face drained of all color. She knew this wasn't just a private family dispute anymore. This was public execution by truth. And the world was watching. She turned to Jason, her voice trembling now, trying to claw back whatever hold she thought she still had on him. Sweetheart, I was just trying to protect you. Don't you see? She's a nobody. She's after your name, your money. She turned back to me, eyes wild with fury. That's why you humiliated me like this, isn't it? You set me up. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. I don't know, Margaret. It seems like you were the one with the lighter. Jason exhaled harshly, running a hand down his face. Then, without another word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His fingers moved swiftly, his face unreadable. Margaret's voice sharpened with panic. What are you doing? Jason didn't answer. He simply lifted his phone to his ear, turned away from his mother, and said two words that made my chest tighten with anticipation. Security. Now. Margaret's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. Jason, no. He turned back to her, his face finally settling into a look I'd never seen before, one of complete and utter disgust. Mom, you are leaving this venue. Right now, Margaret gaped at him, blinking rapidly like she had just been struck. You're kicking me out? Your own mother? After everything I've done for you? After everything you've done to me? Jason corrected, his voice dangerously calm. To Val, 2-hour wedding. He shook his head. You made this choice, not me. Margaret took a step toward him, desperation leaking into her voice. But, sweetheart, think about what people will say. Think about our name. Jason let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Oh, I think they've already decided what to say, don't you? As if on cue, my phone vibrated violently with an influx of notifications. Guests were posting reactions to what they had just witnessed, screenshots of Margaret. Setting my dress on fire were already circulating, and the live stream's comment section was an absolute war zone. Margaret Wilson wasn't just a bad mother-in-law anymore. She was public enemy number one. Jessica, never one to miss an opportunity, turned to me and whispered, You know, I think we just made history. I swallowed down a grin and turned back to Margaret. Well, Mrs. Wilson, looks like the wedding isn't canceled after all. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. But you're officially uninvited. Her lips parted in shock, as if she couldn't comprehend the words. as if she thought there was still a way to fix this. There wasn't. Jason's father cleared his throat, stepping forward with a look of finality. Margaret, he said, voice firm. Let's go. She turned to him, eyes pleading. Richard, you understand, don't you? You know what's best for our son. I do, he interrupted. And that's why I'm standing by him. Not by you. The door burst open again. Two venue security guards entered, their presence making Margaret stiffen. Her breath hitched. Her eyes darted around wildly, as if looking for an escape. There was none. Jason lifted a hand, waving toward the door. Escort her out. Make sure she doesn't come back. Jason! Margaret shrieked, her composure finally crumbling. You can't do this to me! I am your mother. Jason didn't flinch. And Val is my wife. I felt the word like a warm pulse through my body. Margaret tried to lunge toward him one last time, but the guard stepped forward, blocking her path. The reality of the situation seemed to hit her all at once. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. I leaned against the vanity, watching as the guards led her out, the once mighty Margaret Wilson now reduced to a desperate, flailing mess. She shouted all the way down the hall, her voice bouncing off the walls in sharp, disbelieving wails. And then, silence. I exhaled deeply, my whole body shaking with adrenaline. My bridesmaids erupted into quiet cheers, Jessica clutching my arm in sheer delight. Jason turned to me, his eyes softening, filled with something I could only describe as relief. What do you want to do, Val? He asked, his voice steady. The ceremony? I looked down at the scorched remains of my dress, then back at the door where Margaret had been dragged out. My heartbeat slowed. Then I smiled. Oh, we're still getting married. The moment the door slammed behind Margaret, an eerie silence filled the room. I let out a slow breath, the tension in my body uncoiling like a tightly wound spring. My dress was nothing more than charred fabric and ashes on the floor, the air still thick with the acrid scent of burnt satin. Yet, despite the destruction, despite the humiliation Margaret had tried to inflict on me, one undeniable truth remained. I was still standing. Jessica broke the silence first, her voice low but electric. Holy shode! Val! That was legendary. Tina clutched my arm, her eyes wide with something between admiration and exhilaration. But what do we do now? The ceremony. Jason took a step toward me, his hands gentle as he cupped my face, his eyes searching mine. Are you okay? I nodded. I am now. His jaw tightened. I'm so sorry. I had no idea, Jason. I cut him off, placing my hands over his. Your mother burned my dress, tried to humiliate me, and got herself thrown out of our wedding. But she did not win. A slow smile spread across his face. So, what's the plan? The wheels in my mind had already started turning the moment I saw the smoldering remains of my gown. Margaret wanted a ruined wedding. She wasn't going to get it. I turned to Jessica. Remember the bridal shoot we did last month for Cleveland Bride? Eliza still has that sample dress in her studio. It fit me perfectly. Call her. Jessica's eyes lit up as she scrambled for her phone. On it, Jason's father, Richard, stepped forward, his face still grim from the confrontation with his wife. I'll have my driver pick it up immediately. Where is it located? Her boutique, downtown. I'll send you the address, Jessica replied as she typed furiously. Tina turned to me, a flicker of doubt in her expression. But even if we get the dress here in time, it won't be altered. A voice spoke up from the corner. I can handle that. We all turned. The venue's in-house seamstress, a quiet woman named Margot, stepped forward, already pulling a kit from her bag. I was only supposed to do last-minute touch-ups, but I've worked under worse conditions. If the dress fits you, I can make it work in 20 minutes. My heart surged with gratitude. Then, let's do it. The next few minutes were a whirlwind. Jason rushed back to the ceremony space to address the guests, reassuring them that the wedding was still on. Meanwhile, my bridesmaids and I worked to clear the remains of my burnt dress, Jessica barking updates about the dress retrieval like a general leading troops into battle. Margot set up her station by the vanity, her fingers already prepping fabric and thread. The atmosphere shifted from shock to determined energy. Then my phone buzzed. A notification from the wedding live stream. I picked it up, my pulse spiking when I saw the comment section. It wasn't just filled with concerned guests anymore. It was blowing up. Strangers, people who weren't even invited, were tuning in. The wedding was going viral. Holy shite, Tina whispered, reading over my shoulder. People are posting about it all over Twitter. Bride's Mill burns dress live on camera. Val, you're trending. Jessica nearly dropped her phone. Val, Eddie just texted me. He's at the venue. Eddie, my boss at the ad agency. The one who thrived on publicity disasters turned opportunities. I could already hear his voice in my head. This isn't a tragedy, Valerie. This is a goddamn viral marketing campaign. A thought struck me. A bold, dangerous thought. I turned to Jessica. Tell Eddie to meet me at the entrance in 10 minutes. I need him to get the live stream projected into the ceremony space. Her mouth fell open. Wait, you're going to. I want everyone to see what happens next, I said, my voice steady. Margaret thought she could humiliate me, but instead, she just made sure this wedding is unforgettable. Jason returned a few minutes later, his tie loosened slightly from stress, but his expression clear. Everything okay? I turned to face him, my heart hammering not with fear, but with absolute certainty. We're walking to the ceremony together, I told him, and I want it on the live stream. I want everyone to see that this wedding is happening. That Margaret didn't stop a damn thing. Jason's lips curled into a slow, proud smile. Hell yes! The dress arrived just in time. It was sleek, a little different than my original gown, but stunning nonetheless. Margot worked her magic, pinning and stitching with the precision of a battlefield surgeon. 15 minutes later, I was ready. As I stepped in front of the mirror, my breath caught. The dress wasn't what I had envisioned, but in a way, it was even better. Simpler, elegant, stronger. Just like me. Jessica wiped a tear from her eye. Girl, you look powerful, I turned to Jason, who was staring at me like I was the only thing in the world. He offered his hand. Ready? I took it, squeezing gently. More than ever. As we walked through the garden path toward the ceremony, I knew the cameras were capturing every step, every guest, every online viewer, every single person Margaret wanted to impress. They were all watching. But instead of a ruined bride, they saw something else. A woman who refused to be broken. A woman who had won. As the doors to the ceremony space opened and the applause rose around us, I met Jason's gaze and whispered, Let's get married. Margaret Wilson had spent her entire life crafting an image of power, of prestige, of absolute control over those she deemed beneath her. But now, that image was crumbling, broadcasted, dissected, and destroyed in real time. By the time Jason and I had exchanged vows, sealing our marriage in defiant triumph, the wedding live stream had exploded. What had started as an intimate broadcast for family members who couldn't attend had spiraled into something much bigger. The clips of Margaret burning my dress, sneering in victory, and spewing classist venom were being shared across platforms. The hashtags #weddingarsonist, #millfromhell, and #brideunburned were trending worldwide. And Margaret? She had no way to stop it. The first signs of her downfall came minutes after the ceremony, when guests once eager to please her began distancing themselves. Jason's Aunt Diane was the first to step up, pulling me aside at the reception. Valerie, I just want you to know, not everyone in this family agrees with Margaret. In fact, most of us think she's lost her damn mind. I blinked in surprise. I appreciate that. She gave a small, apologetic smile. Richard's been doing damage control all evening. He's furious. He already told Margaret to leave the house until further notice. She's been calling him nonstop, but he won't pick up. The mental image of Margaret, desperate, screaming into the void of unanswered calls, sent a deep, satisfying pulse through my chest. But that was only the beginning. By the time we stepped into the reception hall, Jason's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, emails, it was chaos. And when he glanced at the screen, his eyes darkened. Dad just forwarded me a message from the country club, he said. Margaret's membership has been revoked. Jessica, standing nearby, nearly choked on her champagne. Wait, they actually kicked her out? Jason nodded. Apparently, they don't condone behavior that reflects poorly on the organization's values. I let out a low whistle. That was a fatal social wound. Margaret had spent years climbing Cleveland's elite circles, hosting fundraisers, attending exclusive events, and now she was a pariah. Tina's eyes sparkled with mischief as she scrolled through her phone. Oh, this is so much worse than I thought. The foundation she runs, the big one that does charity events, half their major donors just pulled out. They don't want to be associated with a woman who commits arson at her son's wedding. A slow, deliberate smile spread across my lips. Margaret had spent years looking down on me, and now no one wanted to stand beside her. The ultimate blow came later that night. Jason's father approached us, looking far more relaxed than I had ever seen him. His tie loosened, his shoulders no longer carrying the weight of a suffocating marriage. She called me, he said simply. Jason exhaled, and Richard let out a dry chuckle, and she screamed, cried, threatened, demanded that I fix this mess. She actually believes this is something that can be handled. I tilted my head. And what did you say? His smile was cold. I told her the only thing that needs fixing is her, and if she wants any future in this family, she'll have to start with therapy. Jason inhaled sharply. And she agreed? Not immediately. Richard leaned back, swirling his whiskey. But then I told her that if she doesn't, I'll be filing for divorce. And that, my dear, shut her up. He took a slow sip, savoring it. She has until Monday to make a decision. Jessica let out a stunned laugh. Holy shoshte. Did we just dismantle Margaret's entire life in one night? I met Jason's gaze, and a silent understanding passed between us. We hadn't planned this. We hadn't expected this. But Margaret had dug her own grave, and all we had done was let her fall. The next morning, as Jason and I prepared for our honeymoon, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. From Margaret Wilson, I hope you're happy. You conniving little gold digger. You've turned my son against me. I will never forgive you for this. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then, without hesitation, I typed out my response. From Valerie Wilson, I didn't turn Jason against you. You did that all by yourself. Then, without a second thought, I blocked her number. Margaret Wilson had burned my dress. She had tried to humiliate me. She had tried to break me. Instead, she had lost everything, and I had gained everything that truly mattered. 3 months after the wedding, I walked into the Wilson Family Foundation's annual gala as Mrs. Valerie Wilson. The event, once meticulously curated by Margaret, now bore a completely different energy. Gone were the stiff, calculated displays of wealth and prestige. In their place was something real. Guests mingled freely. The tension that once clung to these gatherings now lifted. The hushed whispers about the scandal had faded, replaced by something else: curiosity, admiration, respect. Jason's father, Richard, greeted us at the entrance, his once weary face now carrying a lightness I'd never seen before. Valerie, Jason, he said warmly, embracing us both. The couple who changed everything. I smiled. It wasn't just us. You had a part in that too. He chuckled, shaking his head. No, my dear, you did what no one else dared to do. You held up a mirror, and Margaret finally saw the monster staring back at her. Margaret, even the thought of her name, felt distant now. She had been conspicuously absent from every family function, every social event. After losing her country club membership, the foundation's financial backing, and most of her so-called friends, she had no choice but to retreat. She had, predictably, chosen self-imposed exile. Last I had heard, she was staying at a retreat somewhere in Europe. Richard had officially filed for divorce. Margaret had tried to threaten, manipulate, and even cry her way out of it, but the world she had once ruled had turned its back on her. And for the first time in her life, no one was listening. Jason's grip tightened around my waist, his thumb brushing lightly against my hip. You okay? I looked up at him. My husband. The man who had chosen me, not just in words, but in action. I nodded. Better than okay. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to my temple. Come on. There's someone I want you to meet. He led me toward the Foundation's newest initiative, a program designed to provide financial grants for women starting over after toxic relationships. I stopped short, my breath catching in my throat. Displayed at the center of the gala was a large banner with a striking logo, a phoenix rising from the ashes. Rising phoenix, a second chance for women. I turned to Richard, who was watching me carefully. This, this is incredible. He gave me a knowing smile. I thought it was time for the foundation to actually help people. Real people. Tears burned at the back of my eyes. This wasn't just poetic justice. This was impact. This was change. As we moved through the crowd, a young woman approached hesitantly. She looked to be in her late 20s, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "Mrs. Wilson?" she asked, her voice unsure. "Can I speak to you for a moment?" I turned toward her fully, offering a reassuring smile. "Of course." She exhaled shakily before speaking. "I just wanted to say thank you. Your story, it gave me the courage to leave my fiancé. He was." Her voice faltered, but she steadied herself. "He was controlling, manipulative. I thought I had no way out. But then I saw what you did, how you stood up for yourself. And I realized I could too." A lump formed in my throat. I reached out, squeezing her hand gently. "You're stronger than you know." Her eyes shimmered with gratitude. "Because of you, I got out before the wedding, before it was too late. And now, thanks to the Rising Phoenix grant, I'm starting my own business." I felt Jason's arm tighten around me, his silent support grounding me. I swallowed hard, my voice thick with emotion. "That's the real victory, isn't it? Not just standing up for ourselves, but helping others do the same." She nodded, smiling through her own tears before excusing herself to join the other grant recipients. Jason turned to me, his expression soft. "See? That's why you had to go through all of this. It wasn't just about Margaret. It was about Botham. About every woman who needed to see that you don't have to let people like her win." I exhaled, my chest light. He was right. Margaret had tried to destroy me, but all she had done was fuel a movement she could never control. Richard approached us again, his phone in hand. "I thought you might want to see this." He handed me the phone. On the screen was a news headline: "Margaret Wilson officially divorced. Former socialite disgraced after wedding scandal goes viral." I scrolled through the article, skimming the details. Her assets were frozen in the divorce settlement. Her friends had abandoned her. She had fallen from grace entirely. I handed the phone back, feeling nothing but a quiet sense of finality. Not satisfaction, not even revenge, just peace. As the night drew on, I found myself on the terrace, looking out over the city skyline. The cool breeze kissed my skin, the sound of laughter and celebration drifting from inside. Jason joined me, slipping his arms around my waist. "Penny for your thoughts?" I leaned into him, smiling. "Just thinking about how, for the first time in a long time, I feel free." He kissed the top of my head. "Good. You deserve that." We stood in silence for a moment before I smirked. "You know, if someone had told me my wedding would go viral for arson, I don't think I would have believed them." Jason chuckled. "Hey, it's not every day you get to say you survived a mill from hell." I laughed, shaking my head. "No, but I did more than survive." I turned in his arms, looking up at him with certainty. "I won.